Hi everyone, before we get started in the stories, I just wanted to say if you're new here and you've never heard of me, I just wanted to say I'm not AI, I am a real person. I recorded these stories with my own voice, and I just wanted to put that out there. This is a genre that is slowly being taken over by AI channels, and I just wanted you all to know I'm very real, this is my voice, and I really hope you enjoyed the stories you hear today. You can also listen to me on Spotify at Southern Cannibal Scary Stories. Without any more interruptions, let's get started. I work full-time at a public university in the US as an office manager, and I'm enrolled in grad school at the same institution. I graduate this May. I have in-person night classes 3 days a week that start right after I get off work. My apartment is on the first floor of a complex about 10 minutes away. Over the past few months, I've had numerous bizarre occurrences around my home and workplace. The first to my knowledge was in September, and was something my neighbor across the hall, who's a very sweet older woman, told me. A man was banging on my door for around an hour just after midnight. I wasn't home. My neighbor poked her head out to ask him what was going on, and he said he was a DoorDasher, with no food or bags in his hands apparently. My neighbor watched him through the peephole and told me that he tried the doorknob multiple times, but there was no ring camera or anything, so no footage. As far as I know, he didn't come back, but I've also had 3 or 4 instances over this several-month period where someone knocked on my bedroom window late at night loud enough to wake me up and my tiny dog. I also have blackout curtains that are always closed. I never saw who it was. In October, a woman came to my sliding glass door about a month later demanding to come in because her stolen device had apparently been pinging my apartment. When I refused, she had called the sheriff's department. The deputy who came out asked me a couple of questions, then left, but did confirm that a device was pinging my apartment. I never found out if she meant a phone or what. The woman hung out in the parking lot before leaving a few minutes later. Obviously, I've never stolen any phone, so I was completely bewildered by this. Never saw her again. In December, things came to a head when I found a plug-in GPS tracker in the OBD port under my dashboard. The car dealership where it got serviced last said they didn't use that brand, Land Air C. And yes, I do have the model and serial number, and didn't perform any services that would have warranted putting it in there. I called the cops and they just wrote down a few details and left. University police were also informed since the tracker was probably placed either on campus or at my apartment. Emphasis on probably. The tracker was the biggest red flag. I never checked my OBD port, so I have no idea how long it was there. I told my unit director, and he offered to subtly remove mentions of me around the office and on the website, which I accepted. I am, however, posted up at the office front desk like 80% of my day. This past Tuesday, right before I left for lunch, a middle-aged man came into the office wearing a hairnet, surgical mask, hoodie, and sunglasses. He claimed to be a prospective student and had questions about FAFSA. He was extremely hard to understand. I directed him to the financial aid office across campus, and he kept asking questions that our office cannot answer. I thought, sure, fine. Maybe harmless and just not all there mentally. He walks over to our coffee machine, not for communal use by the way, but I didn't want to be rude, and just starts making coffee. He's still there when I leave, and one of my staff watches the desk while I'm out. When I return from lunch, he's gone, but walks in after me a few minutes later and just sits in the lobby on his phone before getting up to leave almost immediately. I was off work Wednesday and Thursday, so I came in Friday. I felt like giving my mostly undergrad staff a break, so I gave them permission to head home early, inadvertently leaving me alone in the office. Well, the man came back wearing the exact same clothes, mask, hairnet, and sunglasses within 5 minutes of the office clearing out. Our office is technically open to the public, but isn't really public-facing, and he had no reason for being there, especially that late in the day. He came in, barely acknowledged me, and said he was going to bring back bottled water for our coffee machine. Then he left again. I'm very creeped out by this, so I messaged my director working remotely, and he got an IT guy from the adjacent building to come over with his laptop to keep me company. I explained the situation and he said he'd stay with me until close. He settled in my director's office just around the corner, but it still looked like I was alone. The man does come back without water, and he leans against the desk trying to start a conversation with me. IT guy comes around the corner and stands between me and him, and then he quickly changes the subject and asks about financial aid again, before being directed away and leaving immediately. This was for the 4th time in as many days. I'm strongly considering informing campus police about this. Like I said, they already know about the tracker. I've had problems in the past during my undergrad years at a different institution with men and women being creepy towards me, but nothing to this level. I have no idea what to do. I can't tell what's isolated and what's connected. My family lives an hour away and has been no help at all. I have a sinking feeling that things are going to escalate. Any advice on what I should do or change at home, work, or elsewhere is greatly appreciated. I'm open to further questions. Part 2. Hey everyone. I'm alive and well, but not exactly relieved. I got a lot of great advice on my first post, and I wanted to let you all know what has happened and what I've done. It's been a lot. The 2 incidents that I and most everyone else were concerned about were the tracker and the office visitor. First off, the owner of the tracker in my car has been identified and is totally harmless. I called Landair C, and they told me that it was in fact the car dealership's device that somehow kept getting unplugged and plugged back in every time it was serviced. I guess they assumed it was mine. When I initially called them in December, the dealership swore up and down it wasn't theirs, so I'm really irritated that they were so adamant in their denial. The Landair C rep I spoke to was very understanding as to why this would be concerning, and even said he was surprised the police didn't subpoena the company when I reported it. Regardless, that at least crosses the tracker off the list of issues. As for the office visitor, it's unfortunately an ongoing concern that has greatly escalated. I called campus police last Monday, which was March 9th, and they explained that my director had reported the guy to them already the day before I made my first post. The police didn't really tell me much, aside from the fact that his behavior seemed extremely unusual, and that he disappeared once officers arrived at the building. They gave me the usual spiel about how I should call for a police escort if I feel unsafe. I had to get the rest from my director and one of my staff. Apparently, this guy had not only been hanging out around the building, but had been lingering for a long time on the bench just outside of my office. I can't see it from where I'm sitting, but this was at various points throughout the week, including when I was there. I also cleaned out the coffee machine thoroughly and put it back in the room. Doesn't really look like he messed with it. He came back Friday, March 13th at almost exactly the same time as the previous week. By a stroke of sheer luck, I was already in the back conference room before he saw me. I snapped the attached pic of him speaking to a male staff member at the desk and quietly locked myself in my director's office. He was working remotely again. I called campus PD and texted my director. I could hear the man on my staff talking briefly, and the guy left immediately. He didn't linger like he does with me at the desk. Both the arriving officer and my division leader, my director's boss whom my director alerted, arrived quickly and knocked on the door, obviously concerned. The officer communicated to me that he will be found and trespassed. He has not showed up in our public trespass warning records, so I guess that went nowhere. That wasn't the end of it though. This Monday, March 16th, we were expecting severe weather, so campus was closed and remote work was permitted. My director, however, decided to work from the office. He saw the man again, but this time he was accompanied by 4 or 5 other men in the halls. My director is a very large man, so they scattered quickly when he barked at them to leave. He told me all this in my one-on-one with him on Tuesday morning. I feel extremely uneasy about his apparent fixation on me, or at the very least my office, and that he returned several times in alignment with my schedule. I've been having my boyfriend escort me to and from my night classes in my office, and will leverage a police or male staff escort if he's ever unavailable. No activity from this man since Tuesday. Since making my first post, I did some work back at my apartment as well. I asked the management office if my unit or building had a history of drug crime or any other reason it would be a point of interest, or at least more so than any other unit in an already not so great neighborhood. The manager is a different one from when I signed my lease back in May, and she found no notes about crime or suspicious activity in that unit. I did remember that I sometimes get mail addressed to someone who I presume is a previous occupant, but nothing in my OSINT repertoire came up with anything suspicious for his name. I've also purchased some pepper spray and set up a Ring camera. I totally forgot I had one from when I moved in, and should be receiving a stun gun and window cams from Amazon real soon. I'm planning a range date with my boyfriend to put a couple of rounds through my Glock as well. But yeah, that's the less than comforting update to this whole situation. At least the tracker's out of the way, but I'm still so on edge with this guy and apparently the group he is/was in. I'm worried about what will happen if I run into him again, let alone the whole group. I really don't know what else to do besides literally never be alone ever. I started working in my retail job a little over a year ago. The age range of my coworkers ranges from me, the youngest 25-year-old female, 24 at the time of this story, to about 80, which is important in this situation. One of my older coworkers, probably a 65-year-old male, and I would talk here and there when we worked together, which wasn't that often. He was very sweet, even bringing in fresh cookies for my coworker and I because we weren't working when he had brought them in the weekend before. He was super welcoming and extremely nice, and I truly never got any bad or creepy vibe from him. Fast forward to a few months of me working there, he had to get surgery and take some time off from working. During his time off, he decided to come in to walk around the store and catch up with some of my coworkers. While I was taking my lunch in the break room, he walked in and grabbed a cup of water, and we started to have small talk. I asked him about his surgery, and he asked me about my lunch, etc. But then the vibe suddenly shifted as the conversation started to die down. I genuinely felt like the air was just so different in the room. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card that he had written his number on and handed it to me. He said that if I ever wanted to grab a coffee sometime that I should hit him up. I just kind of laughed awkwardly, obviously starting to feel uncomfortable that a grown married man just asked me to grab a coffee, but because I had never felt a strange vibe from him in the past, I wanted to just chalk it up to him being a sweet old man who just enjoyed chatting with me. It just felt so off though, and after I told him I'd think about it and he left the room, I felt that his intentions weren't what I really hoped they could be. I immediately started texting my friend about the situation, and I felt the urge to cry. However, I was interrupted because he walked back into the room and asked me if I could keep the interaction between me and him. He said that it was because our other coworkers might get jealous that we didn't invite them. That is what fully solidified my feeling of it being a creepy interaction. Because I had just started working there, I didn't want to bring it up to my boss, and I confided in my two coworkers instead, who were both women who were closer to my age. They validated how I felt and told me that I should speak to my boss about it, but I was still very scared to do so. I'm not super confrontational with authority figures. My coworker asked me if it was okay if she could talk to her instead, and I said yes. Fast forward about 2 weeks. I was walking around the sales floor when someone told me that my coworker whom I'd had the interaction with had just come in to once again walk around the store. I told my managers that I was going to go sit in the office while he was there, and that's when my boss decided to go have a chat with him. I sat in the office for about 10 minutes until I heard my boss saying, "I've told you to leave 5 times. Please go," very sternly, and him begging to go into the office to talk to me. It was extremely scary, and I suddenly felt bad that I had maybe read the interaction all wrong. Thankfully, my boss validated my feelings and told me that if it felt weird, it was weird, and that no 65-year-old married man whose kids are probably older than me should be asking his 24-year-old coworker to grab a coffee. But even though I know I shouldn't feel this way, ever since then, I felt a bit guilty that he had gotten fired because of me, especially because he had been working there for years and no one else had ever had a strange interaction like that one. He came in recently after not being in the store since last year, and my heart sank. After one of my coworkers warned me, I went and sat in the break room and waited for him to leave, which prompted me to write this, as I feel like maybe it'll be helpful to hear others' opinions on the situation. Please let me know what you all think. I, a 29-year-old male, recently met up with a guy from a dating app. Disclaimer before I continue. I made a lot of dumb decisions and I didn't trust my gut. I've been out of a committed relationship for about 6 years and out of the dating scene entirely for about 15. I got caught up in the feeling like someone was interested in me, and I let it put my best judgment behind me. On to the story. We met up to smoke and play video games. The first red flag went up when we were talking on the phone, and he said something along the lines of,
"Don't worry, I'm not going to kill you."
I kinda just laughed it off as someone being aware of the environment around gay hookups and the risks you're taking to meet up with strangers and awkwardly trying to ease that tension. Well, the next red flag came up when I arrived and noticed he seemed out of it. When I sat down, I saw 4 of those 99-cent vodka shots. He had 2 more unopened that he downed shortly after I got there. We hung out for a while and he seemed like an okay guy, but he repeated and contradicted himself a lot. He tried to make some moves and I was down, but halfway through he just stopped. He made more comments about,
"I didn't bring you here to kill you. I promise I'm not going to kill you."
I was still caught up in the moment and pretty stoned, so I just brushed it off as more awkwardness. Sometime later, he asked me to give him a massage. He told me he had back problems, so I was careful, and eventually he told me I was doing it wrong. He said we should switch and he'd show me how to do it. We switched, and this is where I realized I needed to leave. He began massaging, but he was pressing down very, very hard and started hurting me. I told him this, and he said something like,
"When it hurts is when you know it's working."
I asked him to stop and just lay on top of me. Out of the blue, he asked,
"Why don't you care about yourself?"
I've got really bad dental issues. I've never touched hard drugs, but you'd say I've got meth mouth if you didn't know me. I'm working on it now after meeting a very kind dentist, but it's taken me a really long time to do so because I've been turned away from doctors and hospitals when they see my teeth and write me off as an addict. So that's where I assumed that question came from. But then it took a really dark turn as he began talking about his sister. He said she was killed by her boyfriend after he invited her to his place for the first time. I didn't say much because I didn't know how to process what I was hearing. Then he said,
"Sometimes I think about doing it because I really want to understand what was going on in his head when it happened."
This sent chills down my spine. I've never felt fear like this before. He was sitting up, weight on my lower back at this point. In my mind, I kept getting flashes of him holding a weapon above my back. I flipped myself over and shimmied my way out from under him while telling him I needed to leave. I didn't know if he had any other plans or ideas. Losing a sibling is really tough, so maybe that was at the front of his mind. But I couldn't deny the alarms going off in my nervous system. I've never felt fear take over my body like that before. After some messages today with really, really weird energy, I told him I wasn't comfortable continuing this and to please not contact me again. I then blocked his number and socials. I'm posting here to make sure that this is recorded at least somewhere in case anything happens. I will go only into the required amount of details of the environment per stated in rules. I was driving out of Nowheresville for spring break at 1 to 3 a.m. with a friend named Jeb and had to stop for utilities just off the highway. Let's just say that this stop was far from any type of civilization, which I'll get to. The gas station was closed. We decided to go into the bushes. For context, it was in the middle of a severe thunderstorm. It felt like driving through a constant car wash. As we were relieving ourselves, the conversation went as followed. "Hey, you see that giant rock poking through those woods on the hill?" Jeb asked. Yeah, I can. Just barely though," I replied. "Look on top of it." Jeb said. There was a barely visible outline of a person standing on top of the rock. You could tell they were trying their best to stand perfectly still, yet also having a staring contest with us. It was pretty clear they weren't wearing any sort of attire for the rain. Of course, we sprint back to the car. I think it was a girl, but it's hard to see in this rain, Jeb said. Car beats some rando without a car 9 times out of 10, so let's find out, I said. We pull out and we were able to angle the car so that the brights could point at the rock. We knew it made a little difference in the storm, but tried anyway. The brights barely revealed 2 grown men working together to both drag something large and appeared to be digging behind the rock from our view. Both were in completely blacked out clothes. We could tell they were definitely okay with getting soaked. What really sent chills down our spine, other than seeing the one originally, was that for the split second they looked back at our lights, both were wearing what appeared to be Halloween masks, or at least something covering their faces that looked like it could have been dark painted hockey masks, before they were able to drag the large trash bag looking thing fully behind the rock. Words cannot describe how fast I got back onto that highway. There were no other cars in the area, and we could tell that the woods were isolated to just a patch beside the highway. Still not sure what it was that we saw, but the conditions lined up perfectly to be no witnesses. I couldn't come up with a logical reason for this, so I hoped others here might have one. I am not a native English speaker, and I'm using a translator. I was coming back from my aunt's house in a small town that has less than 1,000 residents. I needed to go to the supermarket to buy some essentials like water. On the way back, about 30 minutes from the city where I live, there's a small mini market located next to a car wash, right at the entrance of a town that I passed through to return home. Outside this mini market, the parking spaces are very tight. There are about 16 spots in total, 8 on one side and 8 on the other. I went inside, took a few things, and went to pay. I stayed there for maybe 3 or 4 minutes. When I came out, I noticed that a gray car was parked in the lane right in front of my car, which prevented me from leaving the parking lot because the only way to exit is by reversing. My car was not the only one blocked. On my right, there was another car and its owner was probably still inside the store. I went back inside and waited for the owner of the car blocking the way to come out. About 3 minutes later, someone behind me said, "Whose car is this?" When I turned around, I saw a very tall guy around his 30s, and I immediately understood that he was the owner of the other car that was blocked by the gray one. I told him that I was waiting for the owner of that car. He replied in an annoyed tone, "How can someone even park like this?" I could only nod, confused by the situation. He then moved and took a picture of the license plate of the car that was blocking us. As soon as he finished, he asked me if I was from the city where I'm from. I answered yes, and at that moment, looking directly at his face, I realized he was the same person who about 10 years ago used to appear everywhere I went. When I was 14, I used to see this exact guy. At that time, he was much thinner and dressed in a strange way. I don't remember exactly how, but I used to see him on my school bus and he would stare at me often. Even back then, he had visible facial hair, and I think he was definitely older, maybe around 18. This same person who was also on my school bus when I was coming back from school several times a week, and I always felt that something about him was not right. He would get on the school bus lines, dedicated lines mainly used by students from different high schools in the area. One particular detail that made me really notice him was that besides the way he looked at me, sometimes he had a backpack and sometimes he didn't, even though he was on a school bus line. And somehow he was always on my same bus. Once returning from school, I remember this guy being again on the bus and then sitting on a bench in the square while I was passing by, and he looked at me. This guy arrived at the bus stop from a completely different direction every morning, so why when I was returning home this guy walked in my same direction? I lived on a wide street in my city, and around 2015 to 2016, while I was closing the gate of my house, I saw this guy walking on the opposite side of the street. I also saw him other times on the bus during that same period, but then one day, I simply stopped seeing him. Going back to the present, I answered that yes, I was from that city, and he just nodded. The man who was blocking our cars came out of the store shortly after. He was a man with white hair wearing a black leather jacket with a slight hunch and a strange way of walking. The guy next to me, once the man approached the car, asked him if he thought it was normal to park like that. The man apologized, saying he was in a hurry, got into his car, and then quickly drove away. After the way was finally clear, the guy said, "I don't know what to tell you," and then laughed. With a slight smile, he then said goodbye and drove away as well. Now, I don't know if this was just one huge coincidence, but there are two possibilities. This is simply a massive coincidence, especially considering that we were about 40 minutes away from the city where I live and apparently this guy lives. That morning I left my house around 9 a.m. while at that moment it was around noon. If after more than 10 years this guy who I'm 100% sure is the same strange person who used to follow me and stare at me when I was in high school is somehow still following me, then it means he was incredibly lucky that this man parked in a way that blocked both of our cars, or that him and that man knew each other and this whole thing was staged. I repeat, I stayed inside the mini market for only 3 or 4 minutes, and when I parked, I really don't think there was another car next to mine. I've been wanting to share this story here for some time now, but I haven't gotten around to it. This took place about 1.5 years ago now. For context, I'm male and I was 24 at the time. Apologies for it not being super neat and well written. I spent a few hours just writing all of this and I'm calling it there. It was early November in 2024, and it was one of the last days that the Cedar Point Amusement Park in Sandusky, Ohio would be open for the season. I had spontaneously decided in the week leading up to that day that I wanted to go before they shut down for the winter. After all, I had a 24 gold pass I hadn't utilized to its full potential. Unfortunately, I couldn't find anyone to go with on such short notice. My wife, who was my fiance at the time, was having chronic stomach issues and really couldn't handle the rides anymore. Any friends of mine I tried asking were busy that day. So I said, you know what? I'm 24 years old now, super introverted, familiar with the park, and I just want to ride some rides. I'll just go by myself. I mean, why the hell not? I'll have fun anyway, just riding rides and not having to wait up on anyone or go with anyone else's flow. And so I send it. The day comes and I drive 3 hours from my home in Michigan to Sandusky, Ohio, as I have many times in the past. Cedar Point was nothing new to me. Little did I know I was in quite for the shit show. I was about to meet quite the creepy character there. I arrive later in the day around maybe 3 p.m. and go straight to the Millennium Force roller coaster and begin waiting in line. In front of me is a short, bald, clean-shaven guy about my age in a plain hoodie and jeans. Not conventionally attractive at all. Think dainty Discord mod. He strikes up some small talk with me about the coaster, which I entertain, perhaps too enthusiastically as a total Cedar Point geek. As the line progresses, this rapidly evolves into him opening up to me about him being autistic, claiming savant style and that he was smarter than most people. Asking my thoughts on that, asking a lot of random questions about me and what I do, leading me to give away my birthday, where I go to college, the retail chain I worked at, and very roughly where I lived in Michigan, give or take 20 miles. I wasn't so reckless as to say the town though, and finally, that he wanted to ride the coaster with me. Now, at this point, there were really no red flags yet in my mind. I was just trying to be very kind and friendly, as I got the impression that not a lot of people treated him as such. Though I did try to put my foot down when he suggested we continue to ride together throughout the day and said that I really came there that day with just the intention to enjoy my own company and agency. In hindsight, I should have said right then and there I was meeting with friends later. Disclaimer: from here on, I have absolutely no backbone, comedically so, and I make some really stupid decisions in the name of just trying to be nice and unoffensive to this guy. I have always had a tendency to be pretty submissive and people-pleasing. I want to say that I'm painfully aware of how dumb and spineless I was from here on in this story, so please try to not rub it in too hard. We get off the ride and he asks again,
So you're sure you don't want to just stick together?
I reiterate my previously mentioned sentiment. He goes on to ask things like,
Is it something I did? Is it because I'm autistic? People always do this to me.
Should have been a red flag there, but instead I try and console him by saying stuff like, "Oh, of course not, man. It's nothing personal. You're great. I'm just extremely introverted and I just came here with my own plan in mind." He half accepts that answer and then asks almost desperately,
How about we just go on one more ride and then you can go?
And me, with no backbone or awareness of how this was going to play out for the rest of the evening and feeling bad for him, I just say, fine, we can do one more. So we make our way to another coaster, Maverick. While in line for Maverick for an hour, things were fine for the most part. He told me that he was gay and talked about that for a bit. I was just like, oh, cool, man. Good on you for being open about it. Not something I would typically even be bothered to mention, except it's important later in the story. He asked me if I was gay and I told him no, I'm engaged to a woman. He asks me my thoughts on people being gay, and of course I'm nice about it. I don't care. Also ended up on politics for a bit, and finding out that he was gay and a massive Trump supporter was perplexing to me. But anyways, we get through the line after about an hour. We get off Maverick and I prepare to go my own way, and surprise, surprise, he's asking me again if we could just stick together for one more ride and guilt-tripping me about how people always leave him. And like a spineless broken record, I'm consoling him again, saying, "It's not you, man, it's me." And then, fine, we can do one more and that's it. So we make our way to Still Vengeance. In line for Still Vengeance, he begins to go on about how there's this handsome guy in his life that is a friend of his who he has feelings for, and that he doesn't know if he should confess his feelings to him. He becomes quite adamant about getting my take on it, saying,
If you were in my shoes, what would you do?
I asked him, well, is this friend also gay? To which he responds,
I don't know. I think he might be straight, but I'm not entirely sure.
I just tell him, well, you definitely want to figure that out, because if your friend is straight and you confess feelings, it's gonna be pretty awkward. And he was kind of bummed out for the rest of the line after that. It slowly dawned on me that I was the guy. 90% sure anyways. We exit Still Vengeance, and the sun is setting at this point. I try really hard to put my foot down, reiterating firmly that it's been great, but I really wanted to spend this time at the park by myself, and that it's got nothing to do with him, that I'm just really introverted, that I understand what he's going through, yada yada. And well, he's just not buying it. He's on a guilt trip override at this point, and I'm beginning to get very uncomfortable, yet somehow still also feeling bad for the guy. I'm just like, we can walk and I'll think about it, just so I can stop the discomfort for a moment. We stop while heading back towards the front of the park because he needs to use the restroom and he's extremely hesitant to go in. He asks me multiple times,
You're not gonna leave me if I go to the bathroom, are you? I've had people do that to me before.
Of course, I'm just like, no dude, I would never do that. And I meant it. I couldn't conceive of ditching an autistic person in a bathroom in an amusement park. But I won't lie, the idea was tempting. But I told myself if I'm gonna leave him, I'm gonna have some decency and say it to his face, not ditch him in the bathroom. But honestly, in hindsight, maybe I just should have been with this individual. He gets done and we keep walking towards the front, and I think of a brilliantly stupid idea. I'm like, how about you give me your phone number, and if I'm here by myself next year, I will totally hit you up. He's kind of like,
Alright, yeah, I guess.
And he gives me his number. And of course, how did I not see this coming? He then says,
Can you text it so you're in my phone too?
I am completely unable to think fast enough on my feet of an excuse as to why I couldn't do that for him. So I just cave and do it. Now he has my phone number. We keep walking and he asks me,
What's your last name so I can put it in my contacts?
And I politely but firmly decline, explaining that I don't know him well enough to give him my last name. He gets somewhat offended by that and is like,
What would I even do with that information? It's just for my phone contacts. Do you think I'm gonna stalk you or something?
And I'm just like, No, man, of course not. I'm just a cautious person. I don't give my full name to people I don't know. He proceeds to be kind of annoyed but drops it. He then asks me shortly thereafter where I live, and just like earlier that day online for Millennium, I give a rough area, only naming the city I live 30 minutes outside of, and he's like,
No, like specifically, what town do you live in? I go to so-and-so in southern Michigan for work. Maybe we can meet up sometime.
And again, I have to be like, look man, I don't know you very well. I'm not really comfortable sharing that with you. He gets offended again like I'm making him out to be some creepy stalker and says,
Man, we've gotten to know each other all day. You can trust me with that.
He proceeds to pull up Google Maps on his phone and shows me exactly where he lives. Even zooms in on the house and it's like,
See? Now you show me.
And I still hold my ground because I'm dumb, but I'm not that dumb. And again, he's irritated, but he drops it. At this point, I'm mentally and emotionally exhausted and also getting kind of scared. It's become clear that this person is deeply insecure, and I'm not really sure what he's willing to do if I make him upset enough. And I'm 24 by myself and a whole state away from home and anybody I know, and it's getting dark out. At least I'm in public, thank God. So I begin to just bullshit and say that my fiance is not feeling well and I want to get home to take care of her. He kind of understands but also half disregards it and is like,
Please, on the last thing I swear, just ride the power tower with me before you leave.
He does his same guilt trip ritual, and I don't fucking know why at this point, but I cave. Maybe because I'm exhausted, uncomfortable, and low-key scared at this point. I've never been on the ride. Honestly kind of scared of the ride, but it's like I'm paralyzed at this point, on unwanted autopilot. We get in line and he's over the moon. He begins to prattle on about how he loved to ride this with his ex-boyfriend. And so now picture me standing in line with this gay autistic creeper who's all giddy now, probably fantasizing about me. I'm standing before a ride shaped so much like a penis it's uncanny, I'm terrified to ride it. I'm kind of terrified of him, and beginning to question at one point am I justified in laying this autistic guy out flat in public, and all the while feeling like such a pitiful spineless coward for letting it go this fucking far. We aboard the ride, and as we're slowly ascending into the sky, he begins to question if he's making me uncomfortable, and he says that he always feels like he makes people uncomfortable and pushes people away. I don't really know why, but I kind of switch my tone a bit now, and decide to be real with him, thinking maybe I would get through to him. I tell him like, look man, it's not your fault because understanding social cues and reading people's emotions is kind of hard with autism. I understand that, I really do. But when you guilt trip people for wanting to leave and have their own agency, and ask very personal questions on day one of meeting a total stranger, you're going to make them uncomfortable and push them away. The ride drops us out of the sky and bounces us a few times. We get off and he's kind of quiet and seems confused. We're walking now out of the main way at the front of the park, and he kind of starts to rationalize his behavior and explain why he still doesn't understand why people leave him. I kind of just calmly reiterate what I said on the ride, and it goes quiet again for a minute. He stops and looks down. I stop and glance over at him. He slowly looks up at me with a sinister looking face and says slowly,
Do you ever just drive real slow past a friend's house and just watch them?
And I respond back in a very concerned tone. No, I've never done that. And keep walking, thinking like, okay, shit's getting serious now. I need to break this off now, and if I can't, it's fight or flight. I sprint out of here, or if he gets threatening and touches me, I defend myself. He starts to backpedal and act like the slow car stalking thing was supposed to be a funny joke. And I just turn to him and I'm like, look man, this has been really great. I had fun. It was nice to meet you, but I have to go now. Bye. And I begin to walk, keeping my stance sort of towards him in preparation for anything. Thankfully, he just sort of froze up and stood there, and I was able to get some distance and start making my way up front fast. I don't believe he followed me, but regardless, I walked so fast, looking back every 10 seconds or so scanning for him, waiting for him to be hot on my trail. Finally, I got to my car, which was parked like 20 rows of cars out in the parking lot. I got in my car, locked the doors, let out the most exasperated, "What the fuck?" and called my fiance. She calmed me down and we laughed about it as I began to drive home, all the while still paranoid and remaining to be for the coming weeks and months, wondering if he had enough information. First name, birthday, 20 miles range of where I lived, my phone number, where I attended school, the chain I worked for, as well as willingness and smarts to find me. A year and a half later though, and I haven't gotten a single text or call from him or any indication of being stalked, and I keep a gun in our apartment now partially due to that encounter. I know that I was incredibly dumb, naive, and cowardly throughout this entire day with this guy. It's honestly quite embarrassing even to this day that I let that happen and that I let it progress to the point that I did before actually putting my foot down and walking away. I let it ruin a whole day that I had planned for myself, enjoying my favorite fun pastime. At the end of the day, it was a really great lesson in setting boundaries with strangers who are kind of odd while in a different state and alone. I'm honestly thankful for the experience now, because if that hadn't happened and played out the way it did, who knows how else I would have had to learn that lesson. I'm a 22-year-old female, and I moved in with my parents after breaking up with my extremely toxic boyfriend about 4 months ago in mid-December. The way my parents' house is shaped is that the second floor is really the first floor, as the second floor is where the front door, kitchen, living room, and main bathroom is. As you have to take the stairs up outside to get to said door, and there's no way to enter through the first floor unless you go through the side gate into the back, and through there, and while the backyard is gated off, there's a guest house that could be used as an actual house. So my parents rented out, and there's currently a middle-aged couple living back there with their son who's probably a teenager or young adult. I'm not certain because I don't really see him a lot. Anyways, me and that family use the side gate the most. I use it because I get home late and I don't want to disturb my parents, and the family uses it because it's the only way to get to the guest house. Duh. Anyways, my bedroom is in the back of the house on the bottom floor. My blinds are some sort of wood instead of the usual plastic, and the bottom blind is broken so it only faces straight and won't move no matter what you do. If you were to stand outside, you could see directly into my room. I have yet to buy curtains because I keep procrastinating. My bed is right beside my window because that's how it was when I moved in, and I have yet to move it because, again, procrastination. Anyways, about late January, a week after I moved in, I felt this weird feeling like I was being watched from my window. My mom said that it's probably because of the family who live back there. I made myself believe that and went on with my life. Now it's around Valentine's Day. I ride my bike to and from work. I work at a sit-down restaurant, so we were extremely busy on Valentine's Day for obvious reasons. But after my shift, I discovered that one of my bike tires are flat, so instead of riding my bike home, I walk there instead. As I'm walking, I feel eyes on me, but I see absolutely no one, but I take out my taser just to be safe. I arrive home and go through the side gate into the main house, unlocking the back door with my keys. When I turned on the lights, I could see my door was wide open. I always close my doors because I have a very greedy dog and a stash of chocolate he could sniff out and devour in seconds. Learned the hard way. So my heart sunk to my ass. Once again, the way my parents' house is set up, everything important is on the second floor. So on the first floor, when you enter from the back, you step into an open space that my parents filled with boxes, and you can see that layout of the bottom floor. There's a small bathroom on the right, then my room, my dad's office, then the stairs on the opposite end of the hallway. From where you stand when you first enter, the first room you'd see is the middle one, aka mine. So I obviously knew my door was open, not a trick of the light. Despite everything in me telling me to go upstairs, I went inside and got dressed and passed out 10 minutes after I got in bed. The next day I woke up and did everything I do daily, like go to work. Instead of taking my bike, I had asked the husband of the couple if he could drive me to work on his way to his work, because I knew we went the same way since I remember he told me that once. He agreed and drove me to work. On our way, I asked if he had noticed anything weird going on in front of my window, or if he saw anyone enter through the back last night. He said no, and that was that. Now, fast forward to last week. I'm in my bed enjoying my day off watching movies, and I didn't even realize night came until my mom came into my bedroom asking me to turn down the TV so she and my dad can sleep. Their bedroom is right above mine. And anyways, I agreed. I was probably halfway through the movie I was watching when I had heard light tapping on my window. I obviously looked and saw something run away from it really fast, like if you were to blink it'd be gone. I thought nothing of it, probably an animal or something. Then around 1 a.m., I felt something watching me. So I looked but saw absolutely nothing. I finished my movie and turned off my TV, so my room was now pitch black. I was probably asleep for 2 to 3 hours before I heard tapping at my window again. But since my brain was foggy from waking up, I thought it was my dog at my door and I just ignored it. That is, until I rolled over to face my window and saw the shadow of a person standing there. I felt my body completely froze as I watched this thing tap my window. I probably watched it in fear for a good 10 to 15 minutes before the person left and I managed to grab anything important and run upstairs and set up on the couch. I grabbed my pillow, blanket, phone charger, fan, and my dog. I've only gone in my room during the day now, and I refuse to walk to or from work. I sleep on the couch in the living room because I'm absolutely terrified to be watched while I sleep. I think it's a stalker, but I'm really not sure. For context, I'm a 25-year-old female who lives alone. So this happened a while ago, and I still think about how weird and honestly scary it was. I ordered Uber Eats, food and a drink to my apartment. I live in a gated complex, so when the driver arrives, I open the gate, let them in, and then close it again once they leave. Everything seemed normal. I let the driver in, they dropped the order at my door, and I opened the gate so they could leave. When I grabbed my order, only the food was there and not my drink. I was annoyed, but it happens sometimes, and I assumed the restaurant had just forgotten to give it to the driver, so I just sat down and ate my food. After I finished eating my food, I went on the app to report the missing drink so I could get a refund, and that's when I noticed I had missed calls and voice messages from the driver. The first voicemail was already a bit weird. He just says,
Hello? Are you there? Girl,
And then he trails off like he's stressed. The second voicemail is about 9 seconds of silence, and then he just quietly says to himself,
I just don't know what to do anymore, man.
At that point, I'm just thinking, okay, that's a bit odd, but maybe he realized he forgot my drink and is just stressing about it. Then I listen to the third voicemail, and the tone is completely different. After a few seconds, he says with attitude,
Well, okay. I guess I'm gonna assume you just don't want your drink.
About an hour and a half later, I'm on the phone with a friend telling them about the voicemails when suddenly I hear aggressive banging on my front door. Like 3 loud bangs as loud as someone possibly could. I froze because I live alone, and as a woman that instantly put me on edge. I slowly walked up to the door, and before I could even process it, it happened again just as loud and aggressive. I called out, hello? Through the door, but I didn't open it. Then, in a much quieter, almost timid voice, which honestly made it creepier compared to the banging, he says, I'm your Uber driver. I've got your drink. At that point, I was genuinely so freaked out. I told him through the door that I had already reported the drink missing in the app, and I didn't think I could change it. I told him through the door to just please leave it at the door. I didn't want to open it because I was scared and I didn't feel comfortable. I waited and opened the gate so he could leave the complex, and I checked and watched him walk through the gate to make sure he actually left the complex. I still don't understand how he even got back into the gated complex over an hour later, and I don't understand why he was so fixated on this drink that he came back that long after the order was finished. I also didn't drink that smoothie. The whole situation made me so uncomfortable. The way he came back, how determined he was to give it to me, and just the overall vibe he was giving made me so paranoid that he might have done something to it, so I just threw it out. I don't even know if this fully explains how weird his energy was. The talking to himself, the sudden aggression, and the way he seemed almost angry at me over something as small as forgetting a drink just felt really off. I never reported him because I was honestly scared he'd know and then come back. He knew where I lived and somehow got back into a locked complex. Even posting this now kind of really freaks me out. Part of me is like, what if he somehow sees this and comes back? Do you think this is even safe for me to be posting, or should I take it down? Also, this happened a few months ago. Do you think I should still make a report now, or would that be unsafe to do at this point? I really have no idea what to think. I'm posting this for no real reason, just to share a creepy, unfortunate experience from my past. This is my first time posting on Reddit, so I hope I've used the right style or topic place or whatever. I'm a 39-year-old female, and my ex was 36 at the time. Well, a few years ago, a friend gave me a USB to use for music in the car. After about 6 or 7 months, we got bored of the same songs, so my ex plugged it into the computer to add more music. He had decided to wipe it completely, but when he did, he found a hidden folder. Inside were hundreds of photos. Photos of celebrities, news reporters, older women, and people labeled as mom's friends. But then we saw photos of me and other women from our friend group. Some of them had been edited. He had drawn over them, exaggerated body parts, and even turned some into crude animated images. Then we found another folder. This one was far worse. It was filled with photos he had secretly taken, mostly of me, all without my knowledge. Some were normal at first glance. Photos of me sitting, talking, or on my phone. Some were of me bending over to pick something up, but others were invasive. Photos of me sleeping, taken up close, sometimes with flash. And some, he had even lifted the blankets to take the pictures under the covers. There was one even where he was touching my butt while I slept. Looking back, other things started to make sense. One night after going out, my purse went missing from my car and was never found. He had been with us and had later borrowed my car. At the time, I didn't suspect him, but now I'm convinced he took it. Another time, I was in the shower while he was at the house. I heard noises outside the window, like someone moving through the bushes. I ignored it at the time, but now I fully believe he may have been trying to spy on me. He was very socially awkward and he didn't have many friends, so we were some of the only people he spent time with. Because of that, I trusted him. That trust was completely misplaced. When we found everything, we had told some of our friends, including the women whose photos were on the USB. He later sent a message apologizing. He said that he had been lonely and hadn't been with anyone in years, but admitted that didn't excuse what he did. What made it worse was my ex didn't seem to take it very seriously. After we broke up, I found out he was still in contact with him. It hurt, but honestly, it didn't surprise me. To this day, I don't know if anything was found on his devices during an unrelated police incident. I never got any answers. The whole experience completely broke my trust in him and really made me question my judgment of people. Any advice is welcome because I really am genuinely terrified. I work in a bookstore, and I genuinely enjoy my job, but I'm scared to clock in tomorrow after this very disturbing encounter. So I was rearranging some stuff when one of my coworkers came up to me saying this guy asked to borrow a pen and paper and that he gave her the creeps. I just brushed it off, and after like 10 minutes, she was at the register, and I came up to her to chat. She gave me a serious look and then said, "Go in the back now. I'll tell you later." So I trusted her and went in the back wondering what the hell happened. Minutes later, she goes in the back as well and says, "The creepy guy said he's in love with you and he left you this." She handed me the paper he asked for with this eerie satanic looking drawing, and I can't make out what the hell it is. And right below, he wrote something mostly illegible text with crosses and pentagrams. I could only make up something about him being in love with me and wanting to get to know me, and something about a specific belt with crosses that I do have, but I wasn't wearing today. So obviously he's been watching me on more than one occasion. Also, I can make up Queen in Flames in Spanish. I don't live in a Spanish-speaking country though, but most of it was pure gibberish and freaky drawings. He told my coworker he'll be back to ask for my phone number as well. At this point, I'm already shaking. We don't have security in my store, and I called my manager who wasn't on shift. She says that he most likely won't do anything else and just go in the back if he comes in and let my coworkers tell him I'm not interested. Obviously, I feel very unsafe. I'm considering asking to be moved to a different location, and more than anything, I'm angry. I'm aware this guy is unwell and most likely he deals with some mental health issues. But I'm angry people get to do this creepy stuff and lay their head on a pillow at night while ruining things for me and leaving me anxious and terrified. Small update. The assistant manager's in today and we looked at the footage together. The guy looks 40-ish and is very weirdly dressed. I'm 22 and he was speeding towards me as I went in the back, but I didn't notice him. He gave up trying to talk to me and went to my coworker to ask about me. She lied that my shift ended and I was going home, and he hung around the stockroom door waiting for me for like 10 minutes. I have no idea what he was planning to do. Update 2. For the moment, I've been temporarily relocated to another store in the chain. The guy returned about 2 weeks ago. He looked around for a bit and left. Coworker mentioned he was holding some flowers. He returned a few days later once again and attempted to leave another note on a tester for one of the pens we sell. This time security was called in before he could finish it. I believe there was some physical altercation involved. I'm planning to take this matter to the police. Update 3, I guess? There's a nearby store I frequently go to get my cigarettes, and I usually chat with the girl at the register. I mentioned this whole incident to her, and she asked to see the first note and the unfinished one from the last time. She looks very concerned and starts explaining to me that the notes aren't actually total gibberish. She mentioned she became interested in Satanism for a while after certain trauma in her life, and while meditating, she would get a pen and paper, and her hand would automatically start writing in the same creepy style and font as that guy. She said there's stuff in the notes along the lines of, "She will be mine, and we are made for each other." And she asked me if my name starts with A because it keeps highlighting that letter. It doesn't. I'm a skeptical person, and I don't exactly believe in this kind of stuff, but I thought this was worth mentioning. I sold drugs when I was younger. That harmed my community. It harmed a lot of people, not just the people I sold to. It also affected their families. I do not make excuses. I can't undo my actions from the past. All I can do now is take ownership of my mistakes and try to help others. Especially as a girl, I knew that selling drugs would be a risky business. I thought I could avoid those risks by being selective and careful. I only sold to people I already knew and trusted. It wasn't that simple though. My customers told other people, and other people contacted me. It was hard to say no to the money. That's how I met Jerry. Jerry had a crush on me. It was obvious, but it felt harmless in the beginning. I think the first red flag was when he started paying me tips. He would pay me for his orders, and then he'd pay me a tip on top of that. One day, he asked me my shoe size. I told him clearly, "Please do not buy me any shoes." He still showed up with a pair of rhinestone heels the next time he was picking up an order. He said he had already bought them and they didn't accept returns. I was pressured and I just accepted them. I was a lot more naive then, but I still understood that situation was going to create problems. He was going to expect something in return. It also worried me that he always had the power to report me to the police. I used to put my phone on silent every night before going to sleep. I still do that actually. One morning, I woke up and I saw at least 20 missed calls and more than 50 unread messages. They were all from Jerry. He was mad because he found out I had gone to Disneyland with a boy. His messages said things like, "You are so ungrateful. After everything I did for you, you're nothing but a two-faced bitch. You're dead to me. Do not ever contact me again." I wish I could say I wasn't bothered by any of that, but I was. I was afraid of being on his bad side because he could report me. His words were also hurtful, and I felt them. It was also concerning how he knew about me going to Disneyland with my boyfriend. We had kept that off social media. The whole relationship was a secret at the time, but that's a different story. The fact that Jerry blew up my phone was also really unsettling. He had said to never contact him again, so I thought that would be the end of it. I started seeing him everywhere. One day I was sitting at the public library studying. Of all the empty seats, Jerry came in and sat right across from me. He pretended to read, but I could feel him observing me closely. Another time, I walked out of a manicure appointment and he was standing right outside. I was already having really high levels of stress about getting arrested. I kept hearing stories about other local dealers getting arrested. It reached a point that every time I left my house, I wondered if that would be the last time. Jerry's behavior made my stress even worse. Now I was also afraid for my physical safety. All that stress together was just too much for me to handle. Even after years of therapy, that still weighs on me to this day. One day, Jerry approached me while I was about to enter the grocery store. He asked if I wanted to hear a poem he wrote. I said no thank you, left my cart there, and immediately ran to my car. Later that day, I asked my boyfriend for help, and my boyfriend said he would take care of the situation. He brought some friends with him, and they confronted Jerry. As far as I know, they didn't hurt Jerry, but they intimidated him enough to make him leave me alone. By that point, I knew that I needed to leave that business. It really wasn't difficult to stop selling. I just told everyone I wasn't going to do it anymore. My customers had built a bond with me by that point, so some of them were a little disappointed, but I was by no means the only dealer in the area. I'm sure they found someone else to buy from. I hope they didn't actually, but they probably did. I have no idea what happened to Jerry after that. The silver lining in all of this is that Jerry really made me think about my safety. I now avoid situations where I can't access help.